Definitely capitalized on the anger that a lot of Americans feel in crisis moment. The greatest crisis of all, the existential crisis that even Joe Biden said is the number one threat to our military, the number one threat. It is the number one issue. Is of course climate change, and it got the closing minute. And just to talk about that, because obviously this is my wheelhouse, Kamala Harris and this campaign has ended forever this idea that climate change is an existential threat, because existential threats do not stop becoming existential when they poll poorly. Right. And so I am sure if you went back to the 1944 debates, FDR was talking about Nazi Germany. Right. Reagan and Carter talked about the Soviet threat. Right. Because they were existential. They talked about nuclear threat because it's existential. We were told for years the number one threat facing this nation is climate change. And even Kamala was like, oh, yeah, 30 seconds. Big threat. We spent $1 trillion. So climate change is dead, if it even exists. The existentiality of climate change is over, and the Democrat Party killed it.
Well, I completely agree.
Yeah.
And to stress your point, it wasn't even a topic of debate.
Nope.
It was a blip on the radar. The bigger issue was democracy. They didn't care about climate change.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, is if you remember back during the 2020 election season after Kamala Harris was selected as the vice president, she and Joe Biden had sort of this campaign platform of 4 big existential crises that they were going to...
Good memory.
Yeah, that they were going to use to essentially coerce the American people into doing things. Climate, racism, the economy, and COVID. That's what they were. They screwed up COVID. They really screwed up on race. I mean, they made things so much worse between people. The economy, they tanked. And climate, as you just said, Kamala Harris basically debunked the whole climate change thing, because for her in that debate, her whole thing when she was asked about climate change as an existential threat, she started talking about, home insurance and creating jobs in the climate change industry. For them, it's an industry. And that's why they had the, Infrastructure Reduction Act, which Joe Biden admitted should have been called, massive climate spending bill. They talk about, EV cars and charging stations. And she said, we have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I've been vice president. We've invested in clean energy to the point that opening up factories around the world. So she's talking about it as though it's an industry ripe for monetization, not an existential threat. Yeah. And even Greta Thunberg has changed her whole tune.
Now she just hates Jews.
Now she just hates Jews and wanders around in a keffiyeh, and she doesn't even notice about the climate anymore. She's probably just going to take one of Taylor Swift's private jets to the next climate or Palestinian rally thing. She doesn't even care about. She doesn't even care about climate anymore.
If you go back,
she ruined her whole education for no reason.
She has no education for no reason. If you go back 5 years, and it's hard to remember, like a pre-COVID, right? Pre-George Floyd, pre-Russia invasion, pre-October 7th, pre-January 6th. 2019, when the world was relatively calm and peaceful and Trump was inevitably going to win, the economy was great, nothing else was really happening, CNN did a 7-hour town hall on climate change. And every candidate, that's back when Amy Klobuchar was running, right? Cory Booker was running.
They had 20 people. They had 20 Democrats were trying to get that spot.
And the whole thing was about climate change, because they had to create an existential crisis. They had to find that thing that is so ethereal and intellectual that someone like Trump is just too brash to understand, right? We understand the threat because we're the smart, intellectual Democrats. 7 hours to climate change, and now it was, we have 30 seconds left, and before we go, you want to say something about the climate?
He also
that was
had
all it got.